Welcome to This Week from the Principal's Desk, a podcast about Christian schools and their leadership. This podcast is hosted by two Christian school leaders. My name is Rob Lunak, and I'm the superintendent of Lutheran Neighborhood Schools in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And my name is Mike Sheeman. I'm principal at Bethany Lutheran School in Parma, Ohio. And Rob and I have had the opportunity to talk a lot about various administrative aspects. And I know in the past we've talked about evaluating teachers, observing teachers, all for the sake of helping them grow and become excellent for the sake of the students. Well, today we're excited on this episode because we have a guest on with us who's going to talk more about trust-based observations. So I'm going to introduce Craig Randall. And Craig, welcome to the podcast. We're excited to have you on, and figure maybe why don't we just dive right in and have you tell us a little bit about yourself, about trust-based observations, and we'll just kind of guide a discussion through this on how administrators can support their teachers.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited. Well, let's see. I've had a pretty eclectic career, whatever you want to call it. I worked as an elementary school counselor for 7 years. My last year, I was actually as a counselor, a middle schooler I wasn't a middle schooler. I was in a middle school classroom, and with all kids with severe behavior disabilities. And literally, it was back in the day where the rules were different, but I had to do physical restraint every single day. I veered into college coaching for 7 years, small college coaching in Oregon and Washington. And then I liked the coaching, but felt like I wasn't making enough difference. And my wife and I, on our very first date, had talked about international school teaching and how fun that would be. And so we ended up going for that. And we ended up at the American School of Warsaw. And when I was there, the elementary principal after a while said, "Craig, I think you'd make a good principal." And my first thought was, I'm not joining the dark side. But I was flattered, and I thought maybe I should. And I started looking around, and I found a program that would work for me. And I think that's really when it changed. And because I was frustrated with observations, when they were done by people that were doing them well, because you'd have an observation and they'd offer you your suggestions, and then if you're lucky, you'd have another one if you were lucky, and then nothing from those suggestions would even come up. It was a completely new thing. So how did I do? How didn't I do? And so I was frustrated, and I would tell people about that, and they would say, "Yeah, I know. What are you going to do?" And so even when I started my program, I was frustrated and sometimes even wondering why I was doing it. But then my very first day in the supervision class, I met the man that's my mentor and dear friend. And he said, supervision is all about supporting teachers. You have to be in classes every single day. You have to be focusing on their strengths, doing everything you can to help them grow. You have to ask them about their practice, because what they have to say is important. What were you doing to help them learn? What might you do differently if you had the chance to do it again? And I remember that very first day, I always describe it as the combination of the light bulb going off and that hallelujah music that we all know, because I felt like I wasn't alone. Somebody else believed the same way I did. And in that class, we would practice observation over and over and over again. And so we would script, and we would then immediately ask those two questions and share all the strengths we had. And then I got my first assistant principal job in Korea, because I was doing international schools. And I told my boss I had this crazy idea about observations. And he said, "Let's do it." And instantly, I could tell teachers loved it. They loved that we were asking them about their practice. They weren't used to that. They were used to being told. They loved that their strengths were shared. People are not used to having their strengths shared. The traditional ways we do observations tend to look more at what's wrong when we have to rate them on a scale, and it kind of creates a deficit mindset inadvertently in us. And really, I'll tell you real quick, like my very first year, I didn't know anything about anything except this one thing. But I had new and old teachers saying, "You're the best principal we ever had." And it really wasn't me. It was just this way we were doing observations made them feel valued in ways that traditional observations do just the opposite. And so really it evolved and evolved from there. And there's probably more to tell along the way about that. But in my last job in Brazil, that was the first place where the superintendent asked me to work with the other principals and show them what I was doing. I didn't really know I had anything, but I was glad to be able to share, because I knew it was a better way of doing it. And about 3 months in, the elementary principal said, Craig, you need to protect your work. And I was completely naive, had no idea what he was talking about. I was like, Craig, you created something here. And we had developed a form along the way. And I was like, ah, thanks. And then I thought, oh gosh, maybe I should start trying to share this out more widely. And so I applied to speak at a conference and it went really, really well. And then I thought I should write an article. And I did, and it got accepted right away. And then sometimes when you live far away, you've got family things, as parents get older. And so we came home and we'd save some money up and I went to a coffee shop Monday through Friday and wrote a book. And now I go train school leaders literally all over the world and how to do trust-based observations.
I think you really hit on something there because I remember, my first year as a principal, you go in and you go, okay, teacher observation time. And the you have teachers that will come up to you and they'll say, I've been teaching longer than you've been alive. What are you going to teach me? And they have a point, right? And the first form I inherited was kind of a checklist like that. It had 25 items on it, rank them 1 to 5. And some of them, you feel weird ranking. Like I think one of them was like ability to work with coworkers. I'm like, oh, I'm new. Okay, let's circle a number here. I think I gave out a lot of like 4s and 5s that first year. You didn't want to rock the boat too much. And this sounds like definitely a better way to build a conversation with a teacher, to build that relationship with a teacher. And instead of saying, hey, I'm the person who knows everything and I'm going to come in your room and tell you all the things you've done wrong, it does really turn that around. So I think that sounds like something that, yeah, teachers would very much love. And me as when I'm thinking back when I was a new principal, I would have loved a tool like this too.
Rob, if you don't mind my adding to that just a little bit, when we have to rate people on their pedagogy, like rating really whether you get along with other people, that doesn't have the same negative effect. But when I rate your pedagogy, because what's pedagogy? That's my teaching moves, right? That's where I'm pouring my heart and soul into what I'm doing. And so when all of a sudden I have to give you a score on that, one, if I have to give you a score that I know you're not going to be happy with, that's not fun for me on the other end to know, oh, this is going to be a difficult conversation. And we get that hard anxiety when that has to happen. But when the teacher, every single time I'm being observed, knows they're going to be scored, how is that mostly done? It's done through a formal process where there's a pre-conference. And so let's talk about that first. What am I even seeing then? I'm not seeing your authentic normal teaching practice. What I'm seeing is I'm seeing the practice because I'm worried about keeping my job and I want to get good scores that is designed to tick all the boxes. And so then when we're having our conversation, it's not even an authentic conversation about authentic practice. So even if in our hearts we want to do growth, it's not really going to happen because it's not real practice that we saw. Let's talk even more though about the score piece. When I have to give you a score and when you know you're going to get a score, even if Rob and Mike, you guys from our pre-conversation seem to me like really big-hearted guys. And so even if I care about my teachers and I want to focus on sharing what they're doing well, if that score is there, it causes me as a teacher to be defensive, get my vulnerabilities way up and be protective. And so when that happens, even if you're sharing strengths, they are not hearing them because the whole time what they're thinking is, what's my score? What's my score? What's my score? And so these systems, well-intended though they may be, inadvertently work against our best efforts. And when people are vulnerable, when people don't feel safe because of these numbers, they will not take risks. If they don't feel comfortable trying something new, there's absolutely no way that they will get better.
Now, Craig, let me jump in. I got a question for you here because even in the name of your organization, trust-based observations,
Yeah.
it's trust is something that takes time to develop. So sometimes even as Rob, you're saying, being a new principal, walking in and evaluating somebody, it can be hard. And so Craig, what would you say is the role of trust and how is that built so you can get to the point where, as you talked about heart anxiety, that you can calm that to see authenticity in pedagogy?
Yeah, trust does take time. And I think, gosh, I think we can come in and we can get an idea of somebody right away and think, oh, that needs to get fixed. Oh, I got to help them and have good intentions. Sometimes not even the best of intentions, but sometimes making that snap judgment from one visit, it can be wrong. We just didn't happen to see it. But in our rush to fix people right away, it trust isn't there. Like we all know about like the compliment sandwich, the grows and glows, the 2 stars and the wish, the noticings and wonderings. Adam Grant actually put something out that said that doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because they're smart people and they know the only reason you're saying something nice is to tell them what you really want, to fix them. And so that gets the walls up. And so Brene Brown talks about the connection between trust, vulnerability, and risk taking. And really what it comes down to is that vulnerability in itself isn't a bad thing. It sometimes can tell us, oh, I'm doing something that's hard. But if vulnerability is too high, then we're not willing to do those hard things or try new things or to change or to grow. And the way we traditionally do observations, really, the research is really consistent. It really, really raises people's sense of vulnerability. It actually, even research shows that it lowers teachers' sense of self-efficacy. How can we get collective teacher efficacy if what we're doing is inadvertently lowering self-efficacy? So in her talking about the vulnerability piece, she says, the way that we lower vulnerability is by building trust. And when we build trust, people will be much more willing to take risks. So trust doesn't happen overnight. She has a great analogy that is like, think about a jar and putting a marble at a time into a jar. And you have to fill that jar up or get close to filling that jar up before enough trust is there where that psychological safety exists where they will take risks. And so really what we do, and I know it sounds so counterintuitive because of the way we think traditionally about observations, but during the observation, we focus on strengths and we don't rate pedagogy. But more importantly, it's what do we do in the reflective conversation that builds trust. And people will put quotes out on social media all the time about trust and about relationship. And I'm really of two minds when I see those. Mind one is, yep. Mind two is, but these don't mean anything without the how. And we're all about the how because it's the specific actions we take that build it. And so I'm going to talk about marbles just to give you some examples of what some of the things that we do to build trust are. So the first one is we have the reflective conversation in the teacher's room, not in our office. And we say, whether you're 7, 17, or 37, getting called to the principal's office feels like getting called to the principal's office.
Mm-hmm.
If you two think back to early in your careers, there was some time along the way where the principal called you down and you have that moment of panic. And it was nothing, but that's just what happens. So when it's in their space, they feel psychologically safer. And it brings stronger memories anyway, because they're in their space from the observation, which is the day before, because we do them the next day. The next one is when we come to the room, this sounds like a nothing little thing. We ask permission. Hey, is now a good time? And they always say yes, except maybe that once in a rare while where they have last minute planning they're doing. But I could say, hey, Mike, let's go over that now. And you will, but just the slight difference between, hey, let's go over it. I'm telling you. And even though you're going to say yes, the courtesy of asking builds trust. The next trust marble is we sit beside you, not across from you. Psychological research on hierarchy in the workplace says when you sit across from people, that magnifies that hierarchical difference. And when you sit beside people, they feel more comfortable. The next one is we're totally transparent. Like we're all looking at screens right now. Here's the form. I'm not hiding anything from you. I'm being totally transparent. The next one, and this is a big one, is we start by telling them what trust-based observations is all about. And here's what we tell them. We say, look, trust-based observations is really all about all of us building enough trust with all of you so that any one of us can come into your class, see you trying something new, and even though it's highly unlikely, have that thing we're seeing be a train wreck. But as opposed to a traditional observation where if that was happening, you would be freaking out thinking, oh my gosh, how am I having this day to day? You're not going to be worried in trust-based observations in the moment or when we leave, because you know the next day when we come to your classroom, the first thing you're going to hear us say is, Rob, I love it that you were trying something new. Give them a high five or a fist bump. And then we're going to say, because when we've created those conditions of trust, what will happen? You'll keep trying new things, and so will everyone else. And we know when that happens, we're going to improve individually and collectively and do our most important job, improve the teaching and learning in our building. And then we start by asking those two questions. And that's huge, to ask questions instead of tell to start. And I want to talk about these two questions. The first one is, what were you doing pedagogically speaking? In other words, what strategies were you using to help teachers learn? And just asking those questions, what message am I saying? I'm saying, I value you and what you think as a professional. I cannot tell you how important that is to start that way. But even when we ask that first question, we build in another little trust marble. We say, hey, we definitely want to hear about the 20 minutes we were in there, because the observations are 20 minutes. But we all know sometimes when we get observed, you'll think you came in now, you just missed the best part, or you left right before the best part. We say, if that happened, please tell us that too. And you'll see, it's amazing. Teachers go, oh, thank you. That builds trust. So we take down their answers. We actually work to reframe their answers into the pedagogical language of the form, because we think that's important. Because people oftentimes, I think you guys know this, they'll go, yeah, I don't know, I just do it. But I want us to be purposeful. So if we can identify what they're saying in non-pedagogical language and put it into pedagogical language, it makes them more purposeful in their practice. I'm going to give you a quick little example on that, because I think it's important. You'll hear teachers oftentimes say, so when the lab started, yeah, I went around the room when I was checking on everybody, making sure they were on task, make sure they got it. And I was helping out the kids that didn't get it. Oh, and then that group I pulled, they were lost. So I had to reteach it in a different way to them. So we would say, I wouldn't write that down. I would write down and then say back, oh, you were formatively assessing, providing descriptive progress feedback, and differentiating your teaching to meet the needs of your students. It's pretty funny too. People say, oh gosh, do teachers ever get mad when that happens? No, the most common thing they say is, wow, thanks. That sounds way better. And so then we share back their answers, which demonstrates active listening. And then we'll ask, is there anything else? Because oftentimes that will draw more, which is just a courtesy again. The second question is, if you had the opportunity to reteach the lesson, what, if anything, might you have done differently? And we had, by this point, another trust marble in there. And we just say, look, teaching is hard. Sometimes when we teach, we nail it. When that happens, we want to celebrate. We never want you to feel like you have to manufacture an answer to this question just because I'm asking. But at the same time, we know most of the time when we teach, we tend to think, I wish I would, or next time I'm going to. And then we take down their answer again and we share it back. And then it's a reverse trust marble. We don't ask, is there anything else? Because this question is what you might do differently. So we think if we ask that, they might think, oh, what did you see me do wrong? And that would work against building trust. Mm-hmm. And then we start to go through the form. The form is super detailed, which when you first look at it, makes it seem daunting. But that allows me to be really specific with what I observe, which also means it allows me to be really specific in what I share back, which is praise. And we all know praise is fine, good job, but specific praise is what really moves the dial. Mm-hmm. And all of that together, and there's more that goes on through that. That's how we build trust. But I'll add this piece too. I know it's a long answer, but I think it's important. So, sorry, the last little piece is we don't offer suggestions the first 3 visits, because that jar is not full yet. And there's exceptions. If you're a brand new teacher and your classroom management, a train wreck and no learning's happening, of course we jump in. Or if you saw something super egregious, like one time the way a teacher spoke to kids is completely unacceptable. I dealt with that afternoon. I didn't wait till the 4th visit. But by waiting till the 4th visit, we have built trust. And can I add one little story from way back how this kind of came to be?
Please.
My very first year as an assistant principal, I've told you how well it was going in Korea, and I didn't get feedback right away for a lesser and a greater reason. The lesser reason was I knew I was still seeing them like 1% of the time, and I was afraid if I offered a suggestion on something they were good at, that would work against my relationship with them. Like I knew that even back then, even though I didn't know it was trust-based observations. But the bigger reason, if I'm being really honest, was I had teachers saying all these amazing things about me, and I was afraid if I gave feedback, they wouldn't like me anymore. And then the 3rd and 4th round through, something really amazing happened. Well over half the teachers at the end of the reflective conversation would say, okay, but what can I get better at? And I didn't realize till about 6 years later, like when I realized I started thinking about this whole thing as a system, that was trust developing. And in the parlance now, that would be the jar being full of marbles.
It sounds like there's been a ton of intentionality in this entire process. The conversations at the beginning, the way you guys structure all of those to build up that trust. I think a lot of the observation tools I used didn't have a lot of thought that went into them. Honestly, they had some, not nearly this level. There are some that I think probably match this, the Danielson framework, totally different side of it, right? Very much more the practicalities, I think, of the day-to-day teaching, the operational stuff of that. So this, it sounds like a huge commitment on principal time to get this done, and that's not a bad thing, right? I think a lot of the time the observation, we know we need to do it. It's a checklist on our form as principals for the things we need to do that year. And a lot of the time we use it either to put in somebody's file as a record or sometimes, honestly, for those hiring or not retaining conversations. Hey,
Yeah.
I've done 2 observations on you. And you can always tell, especially in some of our schools where the observation maybe happens once a year, who's on the hot seat there because that teacher got an extra observation. And then you go, well, hang on. Why did I get the extra observation? What is this used for? And so
Yeah.
if I'm hearing you correctly, this is not for that purpose. This is to make sure that the principal is intentionally in the room, intentionally building relationships with the teachers much more often than a traditional observation would force them to.
Great question. And so I'll say, look, every place in the world, we have to make evaluations and we have to make decisions about retention. But the reality is, with 90 whatever percent of our teachers, it's not really an issue. We're not going to have all A teachers to throw out a number on it or a letter on it. But let's see, where do I want to go with this? We still have to evaluate. Let's talk about the part first. But the research shows, like, first off, the research shows that Danielson and all these different, they're all just versions of the same thing. They're all well intended. But the Gates Foundation and the Annenberg Foundation both did huge studies, and they both show the same thing. The way we've been doing it does not improve schools. Direct quote, no improvement. So, but we still have to evaluate. And it's the pedagogy is the part that cuts to the heart and gets in the way of what we're doing. So we do still evaluate, but we evaluate your professionalism. Am I showing up on time, getting my grading in? Am I doing my duty? All that kind of stuff. Like you've alluded to, how I get along with others, because that does matter. Planning and prep, there's a little bit of an overlap with that one because I can see evidence of bad planning in a classroom, but it's not pedagogy, so it doesn't cut to the heart in the same way. And then the last one is my mindset towards professional growth. And so just dealing with that worst case scenario first. I've non-renewed teachers. I was at a school that was a newer school, and the initial hires had some not so great hires. And I did a house cleaning and like 6 non-renewed in the first year. And I will say this, in my career, every teacher that I have non-renewed, when I'm not grading your pedagogy, if you're not a strong teacher, it will manifest in 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of those different areas. So not rating pedagogy never gets in the way of doing what you have to do. And then addressing time, because I think that's an important issue. So the observations are 20 minutes and the reflective conversations are 20 minutes. And I'm going to preface it by saying this. What is our most important job? Safety for sure, I get that. But but what's my day-to-day most important job? It's to improve teaching and learning so we can do our best job to prepare our children for adult success. That's our number one job. I don't think any of us can argue with that. It's not to be a manager. And so how am I going to do that? What's the most effective way to do that? And traditional observations? No. But when you reimagine it like this, it really, really is. And we'll talk maybe about offering suggestions too, because I think that piece matters to it, and connecting PD to it because those pieces matter. But if in Chicago Public Schools, I was having a conversation with Kim Marshall, and he told me that the Danielson process, when you have the formal, the pre-conference, you have to write up the pre-conference, you have the formal observation, you have to write up the formal observation, you have the post-conference, and you have to have your final write-up. That takes 6 hours. In the time that it takes to do one formal observation, it's just really a tick box. I'm not moving the needle at all. You could argue I'm doing harm because of what it does to teachers. I can do 9 observations and reflective conversations. So when you look at it like that, is it more time? And even if it is a little more time, When now something that was a drudgery that I didn't look forward to is blissful. When I'll see teachers be so gratified to have their strengths shared with them, when they open up and are relaxed and they start talking openly about their practice, now it's fun to do. And I know I'm doing my most important job. Does that mean maybe sometimes I've got to shift some things around? Is this really my job? Is this something that I can pass off? And so all of those things work together in terms of really what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I think it's that really is like you said, it's something you got to put together. But I love where you do need to put this time in. That's your number one job as a principal is to support your teachers. So making sure that you can do it in a way that is both effective and it builds that trust and makes the teachers feel like they can take those risks without consequences attached to them, and realize that we learn through failures. All of those things coming together is really going to make this a process that I hope teachers will even potentially look forward to. I am on your website, and one of your scrolling comments at the top is, "Can you do this every day?" Teachers that want to be observed more so that they can grow, and those are the types of people that you want to have on your staff that are committed to lifelong learning.
I'm going to say a couple of things about that. So one, we all know there's teachers that I think we all get into teaching because we want to make a difference in the lives of young people. And for whatever reason, maybe bad observations, maybe stuff at home, whatever it is, people lose their way and become pretty set in their ways. One of the things that we find is by the fourth visit, when we built you up and like set a new bar for what observations can be, most of those people, almost all of those people, become growth mindset again.
Mm-hmm.
So it really does an amazing job because we're building trust. So that piece is it's a pretty remarkable piece. Can I share a little story about like what you were saying about wanting to be observed?
Mm-hmm.
Because we do schools all over the world. We're doing a school in Cambodia, and I'm leaving on Friday afternoon with the superintendent. And I'll preface by saying, before we come in, we send a little email off to the school to say, this is what we recommend you tell the teachers, that you're going to love it. The word trust usually draws their interest anyway. But like when people come in with a bunch of laptops, that's not going to feel good. But when you have the reflective conversation, you're going to feel great.
Mm-hmm.
And so then on Friday afternoon, we come across at 3 different times a teacher we had not observed over the week, because we can only observe like 12 or 14. All 3 of them said almost the same thing, and they all had the same sort of wistful tone. They all said something along the lines of, "Oh, I thought you were going to observe me." Mm-hmm. So like imagine that, teachers in essence saying, "No fair, I didn't get my turn being observed." And how did that happen? Because teachers are huge gossips.
Right.
And so as soon as the first reflective conversation started happening, everyone starts going to those teachers and say, "What was it like? What was it like?" And so all of a sudden, people by the end of the week are like, "Well, I want my bucket filled too."
Right.
So think about that.
Yeah. Craig, this all sounds great. And I don't want to give me the last thing you think people need to hear before they're going to go on the website, click on the get the form, click on the learn more, contact you guys, because I think there's been so much here already. I've already gone and filled out the little form, so I can do that personally because I think it's going to be really helpful. I don't have the book yet. I'm going to have to get the book too. What do you think would be the last thing you'd want to tell the people here?
A couple. One, when we give suggestions, we really do it the way that we want teachers to give suggestions to students, as opposed to, "Hey, I want you to get better at that," or "Here's an article," and we support you and coach you through it, where we really become instructional leaders and we connect professional development to our 9 areas of pedagogy. But the last thing I'm going to say, I think, is important. Look, we can do everything we can when we write a book to put it on paper. The system, it's never going to be the same as what it's like when you're actually doing it and learning it. So I'm really going to say, I can't recommend enough training. And it's really all about mastery. And we spend a week at your building or buildings, if we're doing it with a bunch of schools together, going back and forth between the schools. And we practice over and over and over. And it's the little things, like we've all gone to PD where we've gone to a session or a conference and thought it was great. We came back and we tried. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't work the first time, what do? We toss it away. But we're designed so by the end of the first week, you've got it down, and you're only going to get better and better and better. And it puts everyone on the same page. And it also builds incredible momentum in your culture when that trainer's there, and you get those kind of reactions like I was just talking about in that international school. So I just really, really encourage you, if it interests you, to really consider that. I've had 4 schools trained that did it on their own first. All 4 of them at the end of the first day said, oh, we weren't really doing trust-based observations. And they were really well intended. You just can't make it come alive in the book the same way.
Yeah. For sure. Well, Craig, listen, thank you so much for taking some time and sharing more about this. The website is trustbased.com, and I'd encourage anybody to go and have a look. Look around. There's materials that are there, as Rob alluded to. You can fill out a form to request more information. Just want to thank you for spending that time with us. And we close off all our podcasts in a word of prayer. So if it's all right, I'd like to pray us out.
Please.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you've given to us and the opportunity that we've had to spend some time with Craig. Lord, we thank you for his passion for education, for his passion ultimately for the students, for the learners, as he supports those who guide and direct their learning. We ask that you would bless him and all of his work, giving him the wisdom that he needs to continue to grow in this area and to train others so that they too can develop these trust-based observations in a way that builds up teachers as learners as well. We thank you for this time that we've had together. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Bye.